So welcome to ScreenHour with me, Kieran.
And me, Mikey.
And in this episode, we'll be talking about Kenneth Branagh's recent release of the Hercule Poirot series, Death on the Nile.
Yeah, both Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, yeah.
I remember watching like the Peter Ustinov ones when I was younger. Like I've watched them more recently as well, but like my parents love those ones. Like you, Mikey, you haven't actually seen the original versions.
No, well, this is the thing.
Yeah,
I've never watched any of them until Kenneth Branagh started doing them. Not even like back in the day when they were doing like on ITV and whatever.
You're on about the who am I thinking of? I can't remember. It's David Suchet. You're thinking of here. Yeah, he was in the TV ones. So they were great. I love them. Like you come back home and throw one of those on, and then it was like Simpsons later on or something like that. I remember those days. But yeah, so like when I say Kenneth Branagh's brought a new take to them, they're like almost identical. Like they're very, very true to the original source material. I suppose if you want to put it in those sort of terms. They're so identical, apart from, different sort of set pieces and different actors. Like the script, the lines, identical.
Are they one for one? Like,
yeah.
I watched Death on the Nile about a week ago, and I watched Murder on the Orient Express, and like ironically, that's more fresh. So I rewatched that because I watched that the first time it came out, and I watched that again recently, as I say. But I don't know how likable he is.
Like his character, Hercule Poirot.
Yeah.
There's like an edge to him that it's basically you're brought in not knowing much about him as such, especially in like the first one in Murder on the Orient Express, because everyone's heard of the famous Hercule Poirot, but everyone knows of him as the great detective, right? But then all of the people he's surrounded by have all got things to hide. They don't want the greatest detective sniffing around them. There's a whole sort of psychology sort of thing going on there. So they're all going to be a little bit sort of like, trying to keep from his gaze as such, because they want to keep themselves private from him.
I feel like, especially me coming in as I said, I've only watched these two, and I know I know the books have got a huge following, and especially the older generation type of thing. I don't know what other cases he's done, and in the law itself, what's made him such a big deal, what's made him such a big player type of thing.
No, I can't tell you that off the top of my head. It's just sort of.
I feel like the films could
elaborate on it more.
Elaborate a bit more and mention it a bit more. And I like what I like at the beginning of Death on the Nile. Like most quote unquote good podcasts or whatever, we're especially because it's a murder mystery film. I imagine in 15 minutes or whatever, we're full on tell you when we're about to spoil each one because it's a murder mystery film. Don't get me wrong, you can rewatch it after you know it, but that's half the guess, half the enjoyment of the films.
Yeah.
But it's I especially like the flashback at the beginning. I feel like if anything, they could have extended that.
Like you just extended the flashback just to make it a bit more interesting. I suppose that's one thing they could have done because, the original Death on the Nile, basically, I can't remember it completely, but I'm pretty sure the film just begins maybe the night before they're getting on the boat. Whereas this one, it starts, all the way back. Are they in London? I think they're in London, and they're at some sort of show. They're dancing, and then she invites him to dance with her new fiance, and then when you get to the boat, they realise that the fiance is actually a different fiance now. It's the one that was introduced to at the party, and a whole beginning bit, I'm pretty sure he's not. I'm 90% certain he's not in the original. So that's all Kenneth Branagh bringing his own thing there, which I think is quite nice. But as you say, I think they needed to run with that just a little bit more, just to give Poirot a bit more of a background, especially really for our generation, because we know of Hercule Poirot, we know of Agatha Christie novels, but it's not of our generation per se. So we need to be spoon-fed a little bit more about who he is and what he is. And you could say, they could do that in the next film. But if you think of other film franchises, you get a lot of the origin in the first film. I think there needs to be just a little bit more sort of substance there, I guess.
I feel they are good films there, and for what it's worth, there isn't many big murder mystery films.
No, not when
Like,
you really.
which has came out like within the last 5-10 years. Like
Yeah,
I typically get a cinema like 4 times a month or whatever. So apart from these two, the only other one I can think of the top of my head, which to a degree could have its own podcast episode, was
yeah,
Knives Out. And
yeah.
apart from that, I can't think of any other classic murder mystery ones.
No, not off the top of my head. Who's done it? Not who's done it. Sort of murder mystery, but I suppose could you? It's a stretch, but could you merge the girl with the dragon tattoo into it? Because there is a bit of a who's done it sort of thing there, but that's more of a crime thriller than a drama thriller. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you just said like you actually really like these sort of reboots, let's call them, of the Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot. I still have a love for the older ones. There's still like a nostalgia sort of thing there. It's filmed on film, and the real locations, so it feels more real. It feels more sort of grounded and raw. Whereas in this new one, I don't know about you, but the CGI stood out a mile away.
I think one of the notes I've got is both films really lean into like a classy theme. They really lean into the period, I feel.
Yeah.
They to sound hip and cool, they try and be a bit bougie if you catch my drift. And
Yeah.
they're very, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying
it feels like quite no, it feels quite posh and it feels quite elegant. It feels like higher class and
like hoity-toity.
yeah, it feels quite hoity-toity, and I think that's what they and
Yeah.
I do think that's what they're aiming at, and it does succeed in that.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoy the period it's set in and the stylized that it's done. It's just I feel that the new one in particular, it focused a lot on the CGI because there's a particular bit where I can't remember the character's name where he's talking to the guy and I think he's flying his kite on the pyramid, right? And his mother's painting or something, like the background.
Yeah.
That just looks so badly CGI'd. Like it's so like obvious. There's something wrong with the color there because it's like too sharp or something. It's just off. And there was lots of little inclinations of that throughout the film where it was like that's a CG scene, that's a CG scene, that's a CG scene. I don't know if it was like the shadows or maybe there wasn't enough like Gaussian blur or something in the background, so everything was too much in focus. There was like a focus shift or something that was off. I don't know. It just certain scenes seemed a bit off to me when I compare it to the original, where it was on just pure film. And I'm sure they shot certain scenes in like a studio or on a stage or something. They were like genuine locations, like they were actually filmed. Someone actually went out to those locations and filmed them, even if it was for B-roll or whatever. They actually got those shots. Whereas now they just, generate.
I know what you mean. It would have made it more gritty, and it would have made it more like more immersive. Not immersive because that's over dramatic, but you would have felt more there, and therefore you would have felt more attached to it.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And it just sometimes things become a bit too glossy. And it's just you might feel disconnected. And I think that's what I know what you mean. I feel like that's what you're trying to get at.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Disconnected. Yeah, because it just for a moment you're taken out of the world of the film. Could you remember you're watching something rather than just being in it and living with it as such?
I feel both films have good pacing though. They don't seem to outstay their welcome in a sense.
No, I will agree with that. Yeah, the pacing is very well. It doesn't linger on a moment for too long. It moves on, and it sort of allows the audience to sort of again, it's a who's done it, so it allows the audience to piece things together themselves. But it moves on at a decent pace that you don't have time to dwell on a particular moment, so it can still sort of throw you off a little, I guess.
Something what both films have in common. And it's something I feel like they rely on, which is a good thing at the end of the day. The casts are quite big, especially Murder on the Orient Express.
They're quite broad.
And they're all they're quite broad, but they're all good. They're all They haven't. You could say this is a bad thing, but like they haven't took a gamble and been like, oh, let's have this person. They're quite unknown. They're like kind of banking on you're at least going to be a fan of 2 or 3 people in each of these installments. So
Yeah,
you're gonna go in going, oh, William Dafoe's been in loads of good films I like. Judi Dench's been in loads of good films I like. Josh Gad, like especially Josh Gad and Daisy Ridley at the time of Murder on the Orient Express, they were huge. Daisy Ridley, was like Star Wars sequel trilogy was big at the time, and
yeah,
Death on the Nile. Having Gal Gadot as your like leading, quote unquote, leading
yeah.
lady is a huge thing.
You got Emma
The
Mackey from Sex
Emma
Ed.
Mackey from Sex Education is huge, and
Yeah,
also like Russell Brand. Russell Brand's not huge at the moment, but he's got his own type of like fandom which
yeah,
surrounds him. Army Hammer, like I know, don't get me wrong, I know that like we won't go on it too much because we're not particularly like don't want to be a political podcast per se, but
yeah.
like I know it's had some like you know
He's had some backlash
it's had
on
some
certain
like
things,
muddy
hasn't
water and
he?
like certain things, but
Which
like
is a shame
everybody,
because I've actually liked the things he's done film wise, and I've enjoyed his performances. All things aside, his performance in this again was good.
yeah, definitely, I couldn't agree more. Annette Bening is in it quite a bit. Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders. If
Yeah,
you go in thinking they're going to be like hilarious, I wouldn't think that. But at the same time, they are great in it together, and they do just something like you wouldn't kind of expect, but it does fit in really well with the story. If you're looking thinking, oh, they're good together, they are definitely good together in this.
yeah, like they've got great chemistry together. Unfortunately, both of their characters are connected.
Yeah,
One's like the posh lady, and one's her nurse. You can sort of get an idea of where that sort of goes of their dynamic of the one's being always sarky with the other or something. She's always telling her what to do for her, so you can already see that sort of dynamic because you see that sort of thing going on in their sketches and stuff they've done before. But it is a much more neutral sort of humor, I guess, compared to what
yeah.
they're really known
It's not
for, I
as over the
suppose.
top, like yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So, I mean, should we dive straight into the spoilers of it then? Did you know?
Yeah, we go straight into the spoilers now.
Did you see it coming? Did you know what the
The culprit, the twist, the reveal type of thing.
yeah
What it was, I didn't. I just guessed. I knew it was sus in the sense that why would this ex-girlfriend keep popping up?
yeah?
That was my point, and I said it to my partner when I was watching it. And I said, "This wouldn't happen." I said, "Like,
It's just a bizarre situation
it's
that
just a
why
bizarre
would you?
situation, and it keeps occurring." And
Yeah,
if Army Hammer was in love with like
with
Gal
Gal
Gadot's
Gadot.
character, he
Mm.
would kick off and he'd make it known that like you're not coming back here again, or get away from me. I don't want you involved in my new life. But
Yeah,
that's my biggest. That's apart from that. But like to the film's credit, the red herrings it throws at you are believable, and it's him getting shot. That's like obviously the main one it puts in the way.
yeah,
But that's good. That's smart. It has like both films have a good way of like drip feeding you the information, the narrative, and I've put to its credit, and like as we're in spoiler talk now, that is pretty tamping when Book dies, because I think what he does really well, his character, is he's like the layman terms for like explaining what's going on. Like I like
yeah.
to think like I'm not stupid, like, and I can follow a decent narrative, and if it's wrote well, as long as it's not terribly convoluted. But at the same time, he's something for Pryor to bounce off.
He's Mr. Exposition.
Yeah, he is Mr. Exposition, and it works well.
Yeah, it's not overly forced, but it's enough because Poirot's there and doesn't know everyone, so he just needs a bit of a catch up on certain people, and that's basically what Book does for him. He gives that sort of catch up, and then that's how then Poirot then divulges into his theories, as it were.
I
But
hadn't watched a lot of. Sorry, man. Go on, Carol.
okay, so I feel that the way they did it in the originals, though, when because I could be completely off base here, but I think I'm right. Is in the originals they've already booked this cruise right? And the original couple, so Arnie Hammer and Emma Mackey have booked the cruise. Then obviously Armie Hammer ends up with Gal Gadot, right? And she's along with the cruise anyway because she'd already paid for it or something. So it was the reasoning, I think, why she was on the cruise. I think I'm right. I could be completely way off base, but I think I'm right. So she was on the ship because she had financial investment on being on that ship, on that cruise, right? Whereas in the new one, she's just like a stowaway. She's just like a little brat that wants to just be there to make everyone's life a misery. And I don't know, it could have been handled a little bit better. Because as you say, you can sort of see it coming from. I mean, unfortunately, I already knew like who the culprit was and what the twist was, but it was a bit more obvious. It was a little bit more hand-fed, I think, for the audience. But I mean, who knows? That could have been like one of the biggest critiques of the original was it was like completely blindsided that the actual twist.
Yeah,
I
know what you mean. I suppose it's a hard line to balance where you don't want to coming out of nowhere because then it makes perfectly no sense, but you don't want it to be hanging around too much because then it's like, oh, I saw that coming.
Yeah.
To her credit, like I hadn't saw Emma McKay like in too much. Like I literally, I didn't even finish Sex Education. I feel like I'm like one of the two people in the world who hadn't finished it. But she absolutely smashed it. She's good.
Yeah.
And you do feel for it more because she's like, especially there's that bit in the market before they go on the cruise where she's saying, but like it's basically her showing probably she's unhinged and like how like the stuff she goes to the nth degree for love, and you think to yourself, even if like because I knew nothing about it, like you knew she was going to pop up again because why would she have such a prominent scene? Gal Gadot, like you could have done with having a scene between the bit in London when they introduce him, and then
when they introduce them later on, just before the cruise,
and then boom, you're on the cruise.
Yeah,
could have had another 5-minute scene with like Gal Gadot and Armie Hammer together, and Armie Hammer like essentially pulling her, or like them.
Well, it's more.
Them in
It's
a
more
happy,
meant to
like,
be
relationship.
It's meant. I think it's meant to be for more of like a wow factor, as sort of like a shock to the audience that you're kind of like, well, at the beginning you're like, well, where's this going?
Yeah, I
Like,
remember. I know what you're saying because like Armie Hammer doesn't he introduce her, or like they're on the steps or something, and he's like,
so I think if I remember, Emma Mackey works for her, or no, is friends with her, and she'd recently got her hit like Arnie Hammer a job with her, and then she was like, go on, go dance with your new boss, sort of thing, I believe. And then obviously then when you're later on, you're like, introduction to the couple, I can't remember their names, and they turn up and it's like, oh wait, it's Arnie Hammer and Gal Gadot, and then we are sort of living that moment with Hercule Poirot, so we're meant to be in that shocking moment with Hercule Poirot, because we don't forget, we are Hercule Poirot is basically the audience that can interact with them because we're all figuring it out with him. We're all learning things at the same time.
Yeah, learning things at the same time.
I mean, we haven't mentioned him yet, but Kenneth Branagh, we've got to hand it to him. To be fair, he does do a good job with Poirot. Like I was iffy about his mustache. It was very comical. I felt like Murder on the Orient Express when it first came up. Like when you first saw the trailers and everything, you were like, whoa, but he's going a bit overboard here. But he makes a feature out of it. He owns it. So it is a little bit comical, a little bit. But I feel like if you go with the whole period like of when it's set and the sort of significance that he bestows upon this mustache. I mean, when you compare the mustache to David Suchet's, right, it's so different. Like
it's so because I remember him like David Suchet very vaguely, and his is a lot more subtle. I think Kenneth Branagh does a great job at being like quite calm and collected. So it's very evident like Prado's in the room, he's focusing on the investigation.
Yeah.
And it's very underlying, like very like that is obsessive like over stuff. But it's still like you can see that he's taking things in. So I think he smashes that. He does, like, it's weird, like, because compared to you, I have nothing to compare it to, type of thing. But he is a believable detective. You think, oh, he is good at his job. He is, like, clocking things. So he's observant as well.
Yeah, he put his detective deduction skills to the test, sort of thing. You can see the way he asks questions, the way he conducts his interviews, the way he speaks to people, the way he moves around a particular space, how he scans the environment. You can see he's deducting everything continuously. That is an essence of why he's, known as the greatest detective as such.
I think what is funny is, like, after watching both films, it's reminded, like, if he was a real life bloke, he'd somebody, like, you'd want around, but he wouldn't have many friends. It's funny,
No.
like, it's because he's such a stickler. He's such a stickler for the rules. He's such, like, obsessive guy. But, like, you'd want him on your team for something. Like, if it was, like, take it to school. If it's a class project or spoilers, you'd want him to, like, solve a mystery. You'd want him for that, but you wouldn't be like, oh, let's go down the pub, let's invite Praro. Would you? Do you know what I mean? It's just, it makes sense. Like books, like, it's like, oh, my friend Puro. You're like, is he there? Like, is he a bit of a laugh? He's not really.
He's a boring bastard, Hercule Poirot is, mate. Don't invite him.
Don't invite him, like,
He'll just be talking about murder all the time.
Talking about murder. I like
Keep it light, keep it light.
What I did like about this one was that it was the flashback at the beginning does a lot of legwork to show, number one, like, the type of bloke he was, and the type of effect, like, he, like, as I said, like, to contradict my point at the beginning, what would make him famous. So in the war, he's like, oh, we should do this, we should attack at this time, and everyone else is like, no, we shouldn't, and he's like, oh, I've got this evidence, the birds or whatever, it's something like that. And then number two, it shows why he's, like, disassociated with love, and, like, he's broken or whatever. I like in this one that, like, one of the suspects is trying to pull him, and she's, like, legit, like, fancies him, and she wants to take it further, type of thing. She's not just, like, flirting with him to get, like, as an alibi or to get one over him, or he'll hoodwink him. She's literally trying to, like, trying to be a love interest for him. I think there should have been a bigger scar as well. So spoilers at the end when he, like, tidies up his mustache a bit or changes it. He should have been, like, a proper ugly scar. Because at the beginning of the film, in the flashback, when she's like, oh, you'll have to grow a mustache to get rid of your scar or whatever. I was expecting to be, like, fugly after. He's just growing the mustache just for the lols, like.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, to be fair, I don't know why he just didn't grow a beard. I mean, that would have covered it far easier.
Yeah, it would have been done a better job, like, fucking tear up.
Oh man. But I mean, who did you think was going to be the killer before the sort of, like, reveal was coming along?
I don't know if it was, like, going to be Annette Bening, or it was, like, pushed for it to be her, like, lawyer. Pushed, like, because he's like, oh, sign this. She's like, oh, do you want to sign this? And you're like, oh, it could be him. Sorry, I don't know. Like, I think because Emma McKay wasn't really a thing, so Book it made a little bit of sense, and it might have been Book.
Yeah, like, it would have made a bit of sense because it would have been blindsiding, because it's sort of like, he's there as Mr.
His mate, like,
He's there as Mr. Exposition, sort of like giving Hercule the information, and you could argue that he could have misled Hercule for his own benefit to then, turn the tides in his own favour. I mean, would that have been more interesting? Would that have been more shocking? I don't know.
I think it's interesting that, like, the most compelling, like, relationship I found in it was the relationship between Mom and Book. Annette Bening's character, and, like, I think it's Tom Bateman who plays Book. Like, they absolutely, like, the way she cares for him, and, like, you can see that, like, as a mom, like, she looks like she'd go to the ends of the earth for him when she's angry and upset, and she's saying, I've got to protect him or whatever. You feel like she would just do anybody, and feels like she'd be, like, John Wicking people for her son, left, right, and centre. So, like, that was somebody who I thought might have done it.
Yeah, I think she would have been higher. I think, like, obviously, like Book or his mom. I don't think anyone else's sort of reasonings for what's it? But not a reasoning. What do you call it?
Motive, like.
Your motive. That's it. Your motive. I don't think anyone else's motives were quite strong enough for a murder. At least for a murder for a film that's like almost 2 hours long. You know, no one else's motives were quite strong enough as such. So I feel like the other ones, their motives could have been on the level as such as.
Like I said, like Dawn French, and Jennifer Saunders. I quite like their like reveal in the fence. Like, so he's like, "Oh, these two seem a bit sus. Their alibi's not matching up, or whatever."
When
And
it's
then
released that they're actually lovers.
they're actually lovers. I quite like that. I thought that was quite heartwarming.
Yeah, it is. I
It's
guess it is
nice, like
a blind side as such. But I mean, it's not to say that lesbians can't be murderers.
yeah, I know what you mean. I suppose they definitely can. But at the same time, I think in the periods it's set, it's like that was a big no.
Yeah, actually, yeah. No, I generally didn't even think of it like that. To be honest, I completely spaced at that because it's so like just normal in society now that yeah, back then would have been shunned upon, and I suppose yeah, it would have made more sense to keep it hidden.
Yeah.
That generally didn't cross my mind.
But no, I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it. I think it's better than Murder on the Orient Express, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think that's just purely because it's learnt from its mistakes.
Yes. Yeah, I think I will agree with you there because I mean the original Murder on the Orient Express was actually a different Hercule Poirot. It was Albert Finney, and he did a great job as Hercule Poirot. To be fair, there hasn't been a bad Hercule Poirot, but I don't know. I like the setting of being on a train and there's a murder on a train, and I remember watching a film many years ago. I think it's like Strangers on a Train or something like that, right? It might be black and white or something, and I really enjoyed that, right? And I like you're cramped on a train and there's a murder amongst you and you can't sort of get off the train.
Will the next one be on a fucking plane or what? It's like, what's next? It's
No,
like
no, the next one's
and it's on a boat.
The next one's on a holiday resort.
I reckon the next one's going to be like two people on a push bike, on a tandem bike, and then a peddler. Yeah, it's going to be a peddler. Four people on a peddler. Someone gets pushed off, and then Fry just turns up on a fucking rowboat next to him or a kayak, and like, I think it's you. Or I fucking, it's all just public transport, like.
Don't get public transport. Yeah.
Don't get, if that's anything, the rule is don't get public transport.
Or here's another rule: if you meet Hercule Poirot, fucking leg it in the opposite direction. Someone's about to die.
Just kill him. If you see him, just be like, just kill him on the sly. Like, don't put yourself in that position.
Yeah. It's like, why do people? It's like I remember there's an episode of Friends, right? And the guy was like, well, until I was like a certain age, I used to think gunpoint was a place, and I was like, why do people continue to go there?
Is that? Don't do it.
Yeah. It's like, why do people continue to put themselves in danger?
Yeah, I definitely feel like Death on the Nile is a lot tighter. I think, to its credit, I imagine it's a very hard line for writers for them to spend enough time on characters which are important to like who is turns out to be the true narrative.
Yeah.
And also make them be not a red herring if they're not important to the actual motive or murderer. If you catch my drift, I think that's hard.
Yeah.
Murder on the Orient Express, I would still definitely watch. Both of these are on Disney Plus, by the way. I watched them on Disney Plus. But yeah, Murder on the Orient Express. It's
yeah. You can spoil it now then. Now that you've given the plug of Disney Plus, who's not sponsoring us, but Disney Plus, if you want to sponsor us,
this little podcast is barely on its stabilizers. Everybody's a murderer. yeah, that's cool. And I rewatched it knowing that, and it's quite weird when you rewatch stuff, and it hinges on who the like on a twist or the murderer thing, because throughout the entire time, you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, when did I mention this? So it makes sense that this happens. So when
Yeah,
does A happen? So it makes sense that D happens or whatever."
yeah,
And with this, I was obviously thinking, how is it going to highlight that everybody hates Johnny Depp's character? And then it can't, and to its detriment, it like if it was going to do it properly, it would be on to it. It would be on for 4 hours. Like it'd be on for like 4.5 hours. It would have like a 5 minute scene with everybody. Like this is why like a flashback with like this is why Johnny Depp's character pissed me off. He
yeah.
murdered Daisy. Daisy's like I was friends with the Armstrongs, and because of this and whatever. But the biggest problem is there wasn't enough Johnny Depp in it.
No, he was like arguably the biggest name in it.
He was the biggest name in it, yeah, and a lot of it hinges on Johnny Depp being an absolute dickbag. So everybody else on that train, apart from Poirot and Buck, wants to kill him.
Yeah,
And like, I know, don't get me wrong, I know it's more so the act of what he does, but as an audience, you know, there's a big film, and like, don't get me wrong, they do show. It's show, don't tell.
yes,
So that's the thing which convinces you, and like it's best exposition. And they have like a flashback scene like of like Daisy, the daughter, getting kidnapped, then getting murdered by Johnny Depp. I say this and like feel really bad. Like I'm not accusing Johnny Depp of murdering anybody. I
by
just can't
Johnny
remember his
Depp's
character's name.
character.
By Johnny Depp's character, I'll find it out now. But he, yeah, there just isn't enough of him being a dick. He's probably got screen time about less than 10 minutes, and like probably like
Yeah,
5 minutes of that him talking to Poirot, and to Poirot's credit. And you know he's a character who's he just turns around and he says, "No, I ain't helping you." You seem like a dick. Essentially, he says to him, "You're a criminal."
yeah, because he's a gangster. I think that's his background.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It feels a bit of a cop out sometimes when they go, "Everybody did it." It's like, oh, everyone's got a sort of motive to kill. Sometimes you want a bit more than that because it just feels a bit of a cop out. Right, you've gone through 2 hours worth of film to right at the end figuring out, oh, everyone's a killer. Oh, everyone's just got a bit of beef with him. No one's got like a complete amount of beef. They've just got a bit of beef with him. They've got a crumb of beef with him, so they all pull together just to murder him. And that's that's blaming Agatha Christie. That's not actually blaming the film.
Yeah, and that's what it's not convoluted, and it hinges on like the fact that everyone wants to get revenge on him. And like if you like not fall for that sounds like bad, like, but it sounds dramatic. But if you're in on that at the end and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You believe everything.
Yeah.
But I think like what could have been cool is like a couple, like even if it was just a couple of frames throughout the entire film, is like a wink and a nudge of characters to each other that they knew each other.
Yeah.
So the doctor, he like it's alluded to that he knows Daisy Ridley's character, Mary, at the start of the film. And that doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen again. Any interactions before any other characters.
No.
But like it seems quite fragile that the lines are connected. Oh, you know the Armstrong family because you're the cousin twice removed, or so and so. Well, you was
you know the Armstrong
the
family,
Armstrong's
the plumber.
neighbour's plumber. Yeah, exactly. It was that. That's what was a bit weird. And William Dafoe's character was going out with the maid who was wrongly confused and went down for the crime. So that's why he left the police force. And like it seemed just, as in like it made sense.
Yeah.
But it was also loose.
Fast and loose, yeah. So I was like, as you say, like with the Death on the Nile, they definitely fleshed out a lot more of those sort of intermittent problems as such, because those particular bits that we're complaining about now are actually like the way that they wrote for the film, that there was no sort of side glances between characters, and they definitely changed that up a little bit more in the new one. There was definitely more sort of going on between characters, and you could see the connection between everyone. You know, as you said, show don't tell, and you could feel that a lot more in this more recent one. So as you said, they definitely learned from their mistakes.
Yeah, and it is the better one. Like if you haven't watched Murder on the Orient Express, well, you've listened to the spoiler bit now, so you've kind of fucked.
Yeah,
But definitely watch both of them.
yeah. I mean, even the originals, I actually think Death on the Nile is better than Murder on the Orient Express as well.
What is a mad thing to take on account, and this shows how good of like a director he is that Kenneth Branagh has also directed, and this is just the top of the head. This isn't me looking at his IMDb. Within the last, 10 years or so, he's directed the first MCU4 film, Belfast, and the Murder on Orient Express, and the new Prora reboots. So that's just, and all of those are good films. It just shows how good of a director he is.
Yeah, they are solid films, to be fair.
And they're all like, Ford's pretty goddamn different to Belfast, and Belfast is pretty different to the Prora films. It's
Yeah, you got to give credit to him that
and also more importantly as an actor, not more importantly, but like not to be understated, is him in Tenet or Tenant, however you would like to pronounce it. It's insane. He's insane in that.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He is brilliant in that. I mean, he's brilliant in Dunkirk as well. I mean, his part's a bit smaller in Dunkirk, but yeah, he's brilliant in Tenet as well. It's like you can't take away from him the work that he's done, like the level of standard that he's brought himself to. He's done a phenomenal job with his career. You know, you can't take that away from him, and I've enjoyed almost everything he's done. I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I haven't enjoyed, but I don't want to say I've enjoyed 100% because there's always something. There's always room for improvement.
He's like a famed thespian. Like I'm looking at his director stuff on IMDb now as we speak. He's got Much Ado About Nothing, which came in 1993. I remember watching that in like high school. His version of that. That was like, kept me interested when a bloody teen, so it must have been quite good. He's got Cinderella done in 2015. He's done Spoilers, Hamlet, classic Shakespearean.
I actually think his
Cinderella 2015 is like, it's quite fun. Like it's a good laugh.
I think his Cinderella is underrated actually, because I remember watching it and I was generally like, I like this film. I genuinely enjoyed the film. Like as far as Disney characters go and sort of fantasy in Cinderella, I suppose you'd argue it's more of a girls' film. But I actually genuinely enjoyed it. I remember I was doing some work like a Sunday afternoon or something. It was on telly. I popped it on, and just like in the background, just to have it on as I was doing something. And then I just got drawn into it, and I didn't get any work done. I just ended up watching the whole film.
Yeah. So there's our, unless you've got anything more to add, my darling, there's our thoughts on the double bill of that.
Yeah, the double bill. Yeah, I haven't got anything to add off the top of my moment. But I'll tell you what we didn't do. Would you pay to see Death on the Nile again? But like the pinnacle of would you pay to see it again?
Actually, I don't think. See, I watched it in the cinema. So I watched it on the cinema, and then it was on like Disney Plus not long after. So would I? Yeah, I would. I don't know. Oh no, actually, would I pay to see it again? I don't know. So I'd recommend for somebody to see it, but I wouldn't go to the cinema again to go watch it.
Yeah,
so because of the type of film it is. So
yeah, I think I agree with you there.
I'd recommend watching it, waiting to watch it on stream, but I wouldn't go to cinema again the day after.
Last episode we said, for Batman, would you pay to see it again? And I absolutely would pay to go to the cinema and watch Batman again. But the Death on the Nile, it's the sort of thing that if it happened to be on TV, I'd be like, oh, I enjoyed that film. I'll put that on. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to try and find it to watch it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Exactly, that's my point.
It's not to say the film's bad. It's just one of those sort of weekend films. You know what I mean?
Pretty similar position with Murder on the Orient Express. If you fancied watching something good, and you can nestle into it, and he's like, it's a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night, and you think, I fancy watching something half decent. What's on streaming? Yeah, I'd recommend it. But like for some reason they were doing, I don't know, in 10 years' time they're doing the 10th anniversary of like the Kenneth Branagh version, Murder on the Orient Express. I wouldn't go watch it again in the cinema.
No. No,
I tell you,
poor Ken.
poor Ken.
Sorry, Ken. We still love
Poor
your work.
millionaire Ken. We still love your work, but it's a no from the very illustrious Mikey and Kieran. I would watch if it's any consolation, Ken. I'd watch Belfast again, and so
Yeah.
it would.
Oh man. But
Totally off the cuff. I'm totally surprising Kieran now with this. A quick question is: what's been your favourite moment this week? We are called ScreenHour. Of you playing or watching something. So like your favourite moment playing a game. I started watching the Malcolm X film, which I've been meaning to watch for literally forever.
yeah.
The Denzel Washington biopic, and like it's on Netflix as the Black Lives Matter collection, and it's like scary how relevant that still is, and how good Denzel Washington is. And like, that's not a surprise. I'm not reinventing the wheel with that statement, but it's great. Like, and it seems quite like, unfortunately, it seems quite timeless to watch. It was done in 1992, and the moment which got me was when it's when Malcolm X is in prison, and he basically transforms himself, and someone from Islam starts talking to Malcolm X, and he realizes how much he's getting mentored by this bloke, and he's there studying, and he's studying the dictionary, and that's the moment what got me, and I was like, this is really cool, and it just got me hooked like that, and I thought to myself, like, what's interesting about this? And again, it's like over a 20-year old film, but if you haven't watched it, definitely watch it, and that's the moment what got me.
I say I haven't seen it, but I'll definitely I'll add it to the list. I've got a long list, but so I've seen quite a few things this week. But I've gone back to watching one of my favorite TV shows ever, right? And it's actually like a somewhat unknown TV show as well. It's called Person of Interest. It came out in 2011. Did 5 seasons, and it's on the premise of the government after 9/11. The government created an AI system that monitors people through your phones, through cameras, through webcams, through any audio device, and it monitors everyone all of the time. And it's designed to detect terrorist acts. So it predicts. It uses the algorithms of listening to people to decide when a terrorist attack is going to happen, and it helps the government then prevent that terrorist attack from occurring. But the premise of the show is about the guy that creates it. So the relevant list is terrorist attacks. The irrelevant list is normal people when it's been premeditated murder, and it's about them preventing these murders. And it's like a duo that comes together to prevent these murders. And
I remember it came out like it's quite good. I watched a few episodes when it first came out.
I say it's like 100% my favorite show, like no question about it. And I recently started watching it again because I was like, I haven't seen it for a while. I might have forgotten, enough to watch it and be refreshed again. And it's so good. It makes me laugh. It makes me cry. I mean, there's a big thing happens halfway through season 3, right? And I was absolutely in tears. I wept just like I did the first time I saw it. And it's so good. It's just the way it's done is brilliant. And it's actually coincidentally a premise for the Watchdog games.
Is it?
Yeah, they somewhat based it on the show.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, because it is like hyper surveillance and people hacking into things.
Yeah.
Unless
and spoiler, the actual thing exists in real life. It's not as good, not as technologically advanced, but it's called Prism, created by the Americans, that does surveillance through everything. I don't know how well it works, but there is a computer AI out there that does this sort of analyzing of all of our behaviors and everything to determine whether or not we're going to be doing any premeditated terrorist attacks or whatever.
Lesson to be learnt there is if you're going to talk about doing a dodgy thing, Just
Yeah.
talk about it in, as the kids say,
Yeah.
IRL. Make sure there's no microphones near you, which is pretty hard because 99% of the
Everything's-
public have one in their pocket.
Yeah. Make sure you're like in the middle of a forest, you know.
Yeah, make sure in the middle of the
and you're
forest
down-
with no phones on you, and you're down underwater.
yeah, and you're underwater writing on a whiteboard that smudges straight away.
And then you can just set it and just disappears, and all the evidence is gone.
We've hit that screen hour.
Yeah, we've got to be true to the word now. So
Yeah, we've hit the
This has been-
screen hour. But yeah, there's a lot to edit down, but do that later on. But yeah, I
and
hope,
this has been ScreenHour with Mikey
Yeah.
and Kieran. Look after yourselves.
yeah, hope you enjoyed the episode, and don't forget to tune in next time.
Bye.
Bye.